You are listening to Hands at Work audio.
Meanwhile in Africa.
Meanwhile in Africa.
In Africa.
In Africa.
In Africa. Meanwhile in Africa.
Meanwhile in Africa.
One of the questions we ask in Hands at Work here in Africa is, how do one respond in tough times? I'm so fascinated by this question because it really does expose us big time. In the last few weeks, we had an incredible story playing out in Luhonga in the northeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a young boy of about 13 years old, his name is Promise. Remember that name? I always laughed when I watched him at our care point. He was always in the front, initiating games, leading. And then suddenly I heard Promise became very, very sick. And in fact, he couldn't walk anymore. It seemed like it happened overnight. And didn't matter how hard we tried to get him to a doctor, his family refused because they wanted to take him to a traditional healer. And in that time, with the COVID restrictions and the lockdown, it was virtually impossible to move people into Goma to go to hospitals. Bindu, our leader in Goma, faced unbelievable challenges. He had to first convince the family not to take Promise to a traditional healer. Then he had to get past all the roadblocks. And then he had to go to the hospital and convince the doctors that they should take the boy in. And then just trust God that he would be healed. While I made an appeal to many people all over the world that I know are praying, I said, please pray for Promise. And we prayed, and I tell you the challenges that Bindu and his family faced to get Promise out of Luhonga was unbelievable. The family released him, saying if something bad happens to him, that they will hold Bindu accountable. What kind of pressure is that? Then to get him past all the roadblocks, and then to get him in a hospital. And then the doctors eventually took him and said, I have to do a big operation. And he has to stay for many weeks. They have to drain the wound every day, and week after week. Promise, just hoping that he would be recovered and he could go home. At one stage, it just seemed like it wasn't going to happen. It was such a push. This week, the doctor said, Promise could go home. It was like that name struck me for the first time. I realized this challenge was always a promise. It wasn't a challenge. It was, do I trust God against overwhelming challenges that there is a promise in the midst of much pain? Yesterday, Promise went back to Luhonga and the community rejoiced, his family rejoiced. God is good when times are tough. Keep pushing, keep believing, keep praying. It will become your promise.
www.handsatwork.org